Throughout the 20th century, there was a debate in ecology regarding community assembly. The ecologists who were the central embodiments for the opposing theories of community assembly were Frederick Clements and Henry Gleason. Clements stated species interact in a community like the organs in the body. The community is like a complex tissue. While Gleason stated species respond individually to environmental factors. The community is just the assemblage of whatever organisms can live in a given place. Therefore, Clements' theory on how communities are assembled is much more predicated on interactions between species, like predation and competition, while Gleason's view is more along the lines that the main thing driving the formation of communities is that each environment provides aspects that allow some species to live in it and other species to not be able to live in it, and therefore what makes up a community is simply if the community environment supports or does not support each individual species. Neither of these two theories were completely right or completely wrong. This is because there are certain concepts that contribute to the assembly of communities that focus on species interactions, as well as concepts that are related purely to individualistic factors of the species that allow them to occupy a given environment. Ecological concepts that drive community assembly, which support Clements' theory, include trophic cascades and the competitive exclusion principle. Ecological concepts that drive community assembly, which support Gleason's theory, include metapopulations, adaptation, and optimal conditions. The sound used in this audio is from the artist Cosmo Sheldrake. The sound is titled Nightjar Wake-Up Calls. Nightjars are a bird that typically inhabit the desert and rainforest. However, when I first heard the sound, before I knew anything about this species, the two ecosystems I personally thought of were the oceans and the temperate forest. This sound reminds me of the forest because the singing of this bird reminded me of an owl singing on a fall night, and I associate owls and cooler temperatures with forest mentally, which is partly because owls often live in the forest. This sound reminds me of the ocean because the singing of these nightjars sounds similar to someone blowing into a seashell. This sound also invokes the idea of the community assembly debate. This is because one aspect of the sound is the high pitch of the nightjars, another aspect of the sound is what I would guess to be some flute-like instrument playing a calm, smooth rhythm. These two sound aspects are analogous to the contrasting theories of Clements and Gleason, as the nightjar's high pitch and Gleason's theories are individualistic and unpredictable. Gleason's theory argues communities form from just random assemblage of species, and therefore community formation is unpredictable and tailored towards individual species. Similarly, in this sound, the call of the nightjar kind of just calls out at random intervals in the song. Therefore, it is unpredictable, and since it is not played during the whole song, each segment of the call feels as if it is an individual bird singing. Clements' theory and the flute instrument are more predictable and involve more collaboration. Clements' theory of community assembly states that species in the community interact in ways that shape the final form of the community. Thus community formation is predictable and joint. The flute instrument and the sound seems to have a structured melody to it, as it persists throughout the whole sound. Each note builds off of the previous one, giving the sound an organized, predictable, and collaborative feel. Furthermore, as aspects of the contrasting views of community assembly both appear in oceans and temperate forest, this sound further reminds me of these two ecosystems. Therefore, any concept regarding community assembly, such as competitive exclusion principle, predation, metapopulations, etc., can be evoked by the sound. Clements' theory of community assembly can be supported by ecological concepts such as the competitive exclusion principle and trophic cascades. The competitive exclusion principle is the idea that in a community, if two species use the same resource, it is very likely that one species will outcompete the other, leaving the other species with not enough resources and the possibility of going extinct in the habitat. Therefore, the worst competitor needs to adapt certain strategies in order to survive in the habitat, such as using slightly different resources than the better competitor, getting a head start on the better competitor, or being more prone to harsh environments than the better competitor. This concept supports Clements' theory of community assembly because this is an organized dynamic that involves species interacting, and therefore it's possible to give a rough prediction of what species will occupy certain habitat and community just based on their ability as competitors. An ecological concept that supports Gleason's theory of community assembly is the concept of metapopulations in island biogeography. Metapopulations are a system of interconnected populations. These populations can be referred to as islands, which means patches of suitable habitat surrounded by unsuitable habitat. Islands that are large and near other islands are likely to be occupied, as they have a low extinction rate and a high colonization rate. Islands that are small and not near others are less likely to be occupied, as they have a high extinction rate and a low colonization rate. This idea of metapopulations can be extended to the idea of communities with the concept of island biogeography. Islands can also be viewed as communities. Therefore, if an island is near other islands and has a large population, it can be predicted to have more species. This concept of metapopulations in island biogeography is random because it suggests that a key factor in community formation is proximity, as there is a random component in how close species are to islands. These two concepts are nearly unpredictable. Furthermore, the fact that the proximity of a species to one island does not affect the proximity of another species to an island highlights that these processes are very individualistic. This individualism and randomness in metapopulations and island biogeography supports Gleason's theory of community assembly. As stated, Clements and Gleason's theory of community assembly was neither entirely correct nor incorrect. Both of their theories can be supported by ecological concepts of community assembly, many of which I did not even mention. These diversifying perspectives relate to the Mi'kmaq guiding principle of two-eyed seeing. Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall describes two-eyed seeing as incorporating indigenous knowledge with Western knowledge and using the best from both disciplines to solve scientific problems and overall better the world. Both two-eyed seeing and Clements and Gleason's contrasting views of community assembly reveal that ecology and science in general is multifaceted, and it requires multiple perspectives to fully grasp its true reality. Before I took Biology 2060, I very much had a mindset that science is made up of right answers and wrong answers, which is understandable since, because I am a university student, a good deal of my time is dedicated to preparing for exams in which I am required to determine the right answers from the wrong answers. However, after reading about different Mi'kmaq perspectives, reading my lab mates' reflections, and hearing about all sorts of concepts that ecologists continue to disagree on, I now believe that because ecology is a discipline that is so complex and requires a very multi-layered understanding, by boiling things down to only right answers and wrong answers, I am doing a disservice to myself and all the individuals in the history of the ecology discipline that have worked so hard to present this nuance to the world. I would like to thank Allison Schmidt and Peter McGregor for their guidance throughout the entire lab portion of the course, as well as Robert Latta for his work in lecturing the course and teaching me about all the concepts that I discussed in this video. Finally, I would like to acknowledge that these videos I took were on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all a treaty people, and I acknowledge the histories, contributions, and legacies of the Mi'kmaq people and communities who have been here for centuries. Thank you for watching.